Welcome to Boston. I heard this morning the weather was going to almost reach 50, which is very exciting for those of you who aren't from Boston. No snow in the forecast, which is also awesome. And I've lived in Boston for about 8 years now, and there are a lot of things to love about Boston. And whenever I tell people I'm from Boston, they always say to me, oh, it's such a wonderful city, it's so beautiful there, blah, 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 which is all true, but one thing that I don't love about Boston is the weather. And so every winter, I plan my escape to somewhere warm for as long as I can get away with, that I don't get some dirty looks from Kevin, that I can go away and just, defrost from the winter here. So one of the places that I really like to go to is Central America, specifically Nicaragua. And I go there every year. And just so if you're wondering what the weather is like in Nicaragua right now, in Managua it's 92, maybe too warm for some of you, but for me, this is delightful. 63% humidity, light breeze out of the east. Don't we wish we were there now? No, we don't. We'd rather be here. But there's other reasons why I go to Nicaragua other than the weather. It's one of the most beautiful countries I've ever been to, and it also has amazing people. In fact, this weekend I was reading an article that talked about, they had done this analysis, very scientific. They had looked at thousands of Instagram postings. So people take selfies of themselves, pictures of themselves, post it, and they did an analysis of which are the happiest places in the world based on how many of these selfies were of people smiling. And Nicaragua was number 2 on the list after Brazil. And I totally believe it. It is a wonderful place, very pleasant people. So, can anyone guess what this little Nicaraguan boy is doing?
He's finding things in the garbage. They go
Right. So he is sitting on top of a trash dump outside of a little town called Nagarrote, which is about 45 minutes from Managua. Charming little town. He's there looking for anything he can find to sell so that he and his mother can buy food. This is a picture I took along the Atlantic coast. It's a family outside of their home. It's a little remote fishing village. You have to take a boat to get there. And you can see by just looking at their home that it's very simple. They have no running water, no electricity. In fact, I was there with a group that we were installing a wind turbine in the town to power some of the infrastructure there. So they had a little school. They had a health clinic. This is the health clinic. It was actually powered by solar with lead-acid battery backup. So the point is, it's a very poor country. It's the second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere after Haiti, and 40% of the population lives below the poverty line. But it also has great surfing. And this is a picture of some friends of mine along the Pacific coast in a town called San Juan del Sur, and they have surf competitions every year. Nicaragua has become quite the destination for Americans and Canadians to go on vacation. So tourism is becoming a huge industry for the country. A lot of people are also retiring there, and every time I go there, I run into Americans, Canadians again, that are retiring there. I was actually talking with a Canadian on one of my trips that said that they had moved to Costa Rica. We all hear about people moving to Costa Rica and retiring all the time. They had moved to Costa Rica, lived there for a few years, had been going back and forth to Nicaragua, and decided that they were going to move to Nicaragua instead because it was cheaper and the people are nicer. So are there any Costa Ricans in the audience now that I've just totally offended you? No? Okay. I've been to Costa Rica too. The people are lovely, but I would have picked Nicaragua as well. The other thing about Nicaragua is they have great coffee. Agriculture, and I'm a coffee drinker, agriculture is one of the main industries as well, along with tourism. And like many developing countries, a lot of people depend on agriculture for their livelihood. Nicaragua is also very vulnerable to natural disasters and man-made disasters as well. At least they have been in the past. And this is a picture that was taken after Hurricane Mitch in 1998. And it's a dormant volcano. They have many volcanoes there. A dormant volcano that had filled up with water because the rain was so strong during that hurricane. It had collapsed the rim of the volcano such that there was a landslide, which you can see in this picture. It covered a few towns that were around the base of the volcano, and all told, that hurricane cost about $1 billion worth of damage. Around 4,000 people died and many more went missing. And it also caused major damage to people's homes. 750,000 people lost their homes in that hurricane, which is staggering considering that it's a population of 5,000. So 750,000 out of 5 million. 750,000 out of 5 million lost their homes. Major water shortages, food shortages, and it decimated some of their crops. In fact, 30% of their coffee crop was damaged. So why do I tell you all of this? Well, when I go to Nicaragua and I think about these things, I think things that seem far away are actually very close. Things that seem like they're really not part of the world we live in many cases are in some way or another. People drinking coffee, going on vacation, thinking of where they're going to retire, where they can afford to live comfortably. All of these things, we're very connected. And also, when we talk about megatrends, there are many megatrends that are affecting us very similarly to how they're affecting places all around the world that are going to need the same kinds of solutions that we're thinking about doing here in this country and in other countries that many of you represent and are coming from. So that's the reason I show this. I think that there's opportunities we can think about for our own countries and our own markets that we're usually focused on that can have applicability here. And in fact, will have probably bigger impact here when you think about the needs of some of these countries, like Nicaragua. So as Mike said, we work a lot with companies on megatrends, and some of the ones that I think are the most pressing. Of course, all megatrends are big. They impact a lot of people. But the ones that I think really have continuity around the world are the environmental megatrends. For example, resource scarcity, particularly water, climate change. This is actually, I think, probably a lot of people are looking at this thinking, what the heck is that? That is a dust storm in Phoenix, Arizona. And then also sustainability issues. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, recently came out with their latest report. And they basically said, climate change is here, we're dealing with it now. Now is the time to implement technologies that aren't just mitigating. That ship has sailed, we should still be doing it, but we really need to be adapting. And when we think about infrastructure, we need to be thinking about ways that we're adapting to a changing climate. So if you were here 2 years ago, you probably heard my colleague Dan Klein talk about how we advise clients on mapping megatrends to their own capabilities. So he had this nice framework. You basically look for the megatrends that are most impactful on your business and the sector that you work in, break it down into its component parts, you plot it against your own capabilities, so whether market, technology capabilities, and then you figure out, okay, is this within our core? If so, we know what to do. Is this outside of our core and maybe we need a market partner or we need a technology partner? Is this a long shot and we need to really figure out how and why we're getting into that market? And then, then we can move from there and develop a strategy around that. So very easy, right? But when we think about environmental megatrends, some of the industries that are going to be crucial and some of the industries where we're going to need a lot of innovation are ones that also tend to be very difficult to innovate in. particularly water, construction, and agriculture. One metric, it's just one metric out of many, but if we want to think about how easy it is to have a startup that does well in some of these spaces, you can look at how much VC money is going into these. And what we've seen over time is that there's been an excitement about water, there's been an excitement about green build, there's currently an excitement about agriculture. But after time, when the high-risk capital gets frustrated with how long it takes to actually make money, or how big the money is once you do make it. Many of these companies that do startups in these spaces don't IPO, they get acquired. You start to see that there's also an exodus. This is some work that my colleagues on the water team, Brent Giles and Tess Murray, did. Also, I think Naveen Krishnamurthy was involved in this. Global water deals by investment stage. And you can see here, it ends in 2012, but the trend would continue where a lot of the investments are going to later stage companies. So they're keeping their investments alive, but there's not growing interest. In fact, some lower interest you can see in the blue with earlier stage funding rounds. You can see a similar trend in green build over time, companies getting excited. You see this big spike in investments in green build, and then it started to decline there. Not to say that there aren't opportunities in both of these, but there certainly has been a peak and then a decline in both of them. And we're seeing new venture funds get created specifically dedicated to agriculture. Some of these haven't even invested in any companies yet, but they're there, they're ready, they're interested in ag. And I think we'll see a similar kind of trend where there's this huge excitement and then a downward trend as they find that it's really challenging to make money in some of these spaces. Of course, again, there's going to be examples of things that do well. So why is it so challenging? What is it about these industries that make it so challenging? And I've had a bunch of conversations with folks in all of these industries who will say, yeah, it's really, really hard to innovate successfully in these spaces. So some of the reasons are they tend to be very conservative industries where end users are slow to adopt new technology. And there are many reasons for that. There's the way things have always been done. But then there's also some more difficult barriers, such as there are standards, there are regulations that have to be followed within these industries. They're also very fragmented markets where either the customer base or the supply chain is very different depending on where you are. And then they also tend to be dominated by a few large players, and in some cases these large players are government entities. So what do you do? How do you innovate? How do you do important things in spaces where it's challenging? Well, we looked at these different industries. We looked at what folks were doing in them, and we came up with 3 strategies that are working in all of these industries. And we've characterized them with 3 simple words: integration, accommodation, and cooperation. So integration, one thing that you can see in all of these industries and many industries is big data. A lot more information is being generated, is being analyzed, is helping to make more efficient and cost-effective decisions for operation of whatever system we're talking about. A much more complex system than what we've had in the past. So being able to integrate all of that data, all of that analysis, integrate it into the existing framework of that industry is important. Opportunities also need to be accommodating to the existing industry. As I mentioned, there are standards, there are ways of doing things, so having some understanding of how things work in these industries is important. I have talked with folks that will say, it's really hard to think that you're going to have a new water innovation when the folks that are developing it haven't worked in water. And also, I was talking with Rick from the National Corn Growers Association. Rick, are you in the audience? Raise your hand. He'll be on a panel later today in Ag, and he said a great quote that he has graciously allowed me to repeat here, which is, people might know agriculture, but they don't know farming. And the point is that you can have these solutions, but if you don't understand how it's being implemented, what the needs are of the industry, aren't really connected on that level, it's not going to work. And then cooperation is key. We say it over and over and over again. You need to cooperate, you need to partner, but it's especially true in these industries. You need to work with the key players. So let's go through some examples. So we'll start with the water industry. And we lose about 30% of the water that we already purify through leaks and bursts in our systems globally. It can range anywhere from 10 to 60% depending on the system, which is, I think on some level, pretty shocking. I mean, this is pure water. We've gone through the trouble of purifying it, and it's just leaking out. So how do you deal with this situation? Some of the innovations in this space certainly offer solutions. So monitoring and forecasting and control is one area where we're seeing a lot of innovation. We're also seeing innovation in wastewater treatment. But I'll just focus on integration because that kind of falls into the theme that we're thinking about here. One company that I think exemplifies what's working well in water for integration is a company called Takadu. And my water colleagues warned me I'm going to get rolling eyes from using this example because everyone in water knows Takadu. So I apologize to the water people, but I think it's a great example of a company that's been able to succeed in the water space. So what do? They're a software company. They don't do hardware at all. And they take data from all kinds of different sources. So sensors, GIS data, weather data. They have a patented algorithm where they analyze the data and then are able to tell customers how their system is doing. And they've done this for customers all over the world. They can see how the performance is. But one thing they do that's really special is they're able to pinpoint at the street level where there's a leak in the system. And it's really difficult to find a leak, fix a leak. It's very expensive. So they help customers hone in on the right place where they need to be looking. They also have been able to indicate where there's going to be a burst before it even happens. So really important technology. One of the other things they've been able to do, other than to be able to integrate all of this disparate data and work within all kinds of different systems all over the world, is they've partnered with folks in all of the companies in all of the places where they're doing business. So all of these companies on the left are companies that also offer water management software in their respective countries. So they're operating in Brazil, Portugal, Chile, Taiwan, all over the place. Many of you who have worked with us in the past have seen this spider graph on the right-hand side, and it's our scoring system. So for every company that we profile, we score them on several metrics, whether it's the strength of their IP, the technology value. We also score them on partnerships, and we gave Takadu a score of 4 out of 5. For really being able to tap into and work with local partners. But this isn't the only example that works. Integration isn't the only example we've seen work in the water space. We've also seen accommodation. So because things are different everywhere, everyone's got their own system, and it's a really complex system, being able to work within that system is important. So one of the companies that's been able to do that effectively is Global Water. They have a product called Fathom, which does back office and water management systems. So they've been very successful. They actually developed it for themselves for managing water systems, and then they've been able to integrate it into other folks' systems as well. This is an area, again, where cooperation with key players is really critical. One of the reasons Takadu has not been successful or has not been able to really penetrate the US market is because we actually don't have a sophisticated enough system in many places with all of the sensors that you would need to be able to effectively use their software. And our utilities just don't have the money to do those upgrades. So one company that has figured that out is a company called MIA. They've worked not in the US, but in Manila to fund the upgrades to the local water system. And then they've spread that cost out over time through their service contract with the utility. So very close cooperation, very creative ways of bringing the system to a more advanced level. Okay, so I want to go back to my vacation pictures, if I could, for just a moment, and talk about a trip I took to Cuba a few years ago. This was back in 2010, and if there's anyone from the IRS in the audience, I was there legally. I had permission to be there. For those of you not from the US, we're not allowed to go there. So there's a very hefty fine if you go to Cuba as an American citizen. But I had permission. So I was there to speak at a conference, and I talked about climate adaptation. And I was the only one there talking about climate adaptation. Everyone else was talking about mitigation still. And this was 2010. These are some pictures I took while I was there. Solar panels, biogas, biofuels, some pictures along the road of billboards as you're driving to, energy efficiency, use the right light bulbs in your lamps, don't feed corn to your cars. So any guess what this is a picture of? No? These are pictures from Hurricane Katrina. So back in 2005, the southern US was hit with a major storm. In New Orleans, it caused the levees to break and caused massive flooding and was really a huge embarrassment to how ill-prepared we were for a major severe weather event. So this was 5 years before my 2010 trip, and even then, people still weren't comfortable talking about severe weather being linked to climate change. But I think things are changing, and within the past year, I'm hearing more and more people talk about severe weather, climate change. This is a new paradigm of what we're living in. So this is another picture of a major storm in the US. It's Hurricane Sandy, which caused almost $7 billion worth of damage. And this actually is a picture down the street from where I grew up. I grew up along the Jersey Shore, and there was massive damage to my hometown and the surrounding towns. I knew many people who lost their homes, lost their businesses. My family, too, my father couldn't live in his house for 6 months because of the extensive damage that was happening. And this is expected to happen more and more as we go forward. From that IPCC report, they state most aspects of climate change will persist for many centuries, even if we stop with the emissions now. So things have changed. We now need to start adapting. So what are we doing? What do we have? What tools do we have available to us to do this? Well, this is from a report that my colleague Aditya Ranade did on construction, trends in construction. And he looked at climate-resilient materials and climate-resilient construction. And you can see there's phase change materials. There are materials that will absorb and release heat to reduce the cooling load for buildings. There's salt-resistant construction. There's waterproofing, and so on. So I wanted to just focus on the salt-resistant construction component. And this is a great example of accommodating the existing industry. This company called Ceratec makes a product based on fly ash. It's a cement that you can put into concrete. It's drop-in ready. It replaces the conventional alternative, which is Portland cement. And because it's from fly ash, it's much more environmentally friendly. It's because that's an industrial waste product that comes from coal power. And so it's low cost, it's green, it's great. So, but besides that, and I think to some extent, more importantly, it offers low chlorine permeability, so it has higher chemical and heat resistance than the alternative. So it's a great replacement material if we're talking about trying to make our infrastructure projects more resilient to the weather that's to come. And then Aditya also did an analysis of how big this market could be and estimated that it's expected to grow from about $23 billion today to $47 billion by 2018. So this isn't just it's a good thing to do, but it's actually a great way to make money. So we can also see that they have been very successful in partnerships. We scored them a 4 out of 5, similar to Takadu. They've partnered with concrete companies in Latin America, with coal companies, with the US Marines. So they've definitely worked to build up their company around partnerships and cooperation as well. And again, we can find examples in all of these. So integration, there's a company, HR Wallingford, that has done a smart levee project in the Netherlands. So these are projects where the integration of temperature sensors, water pressure sensors, all kinds of information to let people know when there might be a breach in the levee, how things are going, early warning systems. And they've partnered and worked to integrate a lot of different technologies into this system. And then I can give you an example of cooperation as well. So there's a company in India called Garware Wall Ropes, which I really think needs to change their name because that is a mouthful to say. But they create a geosynthetic rope that is used for coastal protection. And they've worked with the city of Odisha in India to implement this technology. They're working with the Indian Institute of Technology. They've also been working with the World Bank. So they're bringing together all of the key players to help implement their technology. And in the construction space, one area where we see there's a lot of opportunity is for companies to partner with EPCs. These are the companies that are going to be working closely with the cities. The cities are the ones that are going to be doing these infrastructure projects, seawall projects. I was reading a study the other day that asked people in the construction industry, what's the biggest driver of new business in your industry? And they said over 60, I think it was 66% will be from government-led infrastructure projects. So partnering with those that have access, that you can integrate your technology into what they're doing, will be a successful initiative in this space. Okay, so let me go through the last example I have in agriculture. And I love this picture because I think it really shows how different agriculture can be in different places and how fragmented the market can be. So whether we talk about farming plants or farming fish or working with livestock, it's a very fragmented market. There are different needs in different places. You can see here on the left, this is a picture of where aquaculture, fish farming started in Norway, and very sophisticated system. And then on the right, you can see where most of the fish comes from, which is China, and very different, stark contrast between the two. So, how do you work within that paradigm? Well, what are some of the innovations happening to tackle these problems in agriculture? Well, one of the areas where we see a lot of innovation is precision agriculture. And that very much fits into our theme of integration and data collection and analysis. You got soil sensors, weather data, you put it all together, figure out what kind of water delivery, nutrient, pesticide delivery you need to be more effective, both in terms of the impact you have, but also with cost savings. But another area we're seeing a lot of work in is biopesticides. And this is work from Sarah Olson, who leads our Ag Innovation Group. They have been tracking the different deals that are happening in the ag space and specifically in biopesticides. And you can see that there have been several interesting deals, but the one that I wanted to focus on is this partnership between Monsanto and Novozymes, because I think this one is really interesting and really different. And on many levels, Novozymes is, in my mind, one of the best at cooperation. Just to give you a little bit of background on Novozymes, they're a much bigger company than the other companies that I've profiled so far. Their market cap is $15 billion. They've been around for about 100 years, and they focus on enzymes and microorganisms for everything from household items to pharmaceuticals. And they also do work in agriculture. They have a long history of partnering. They've partnered with DSM on Ronozyme for livestock. They've partnered with Syngenta on crops, improving phosphate availability, biofungicides. But the one that I think is more interesting is this one that they're calling BioAg Alliance with Monsanto, and I think they may have changed the name from BioAg Alliance. But the whole premise is, it's really expensive to bring a new molecule to market. Let's work together. Let's leverage each other's strengths so that we can get there faster and at lower cost. This is more of a bio-based approach, but if you just think about how much money and how long it takes to bring new chemicals to the market, it takes a long time. I had an estimate that it takes about $1 billion in 10 years to bring a new pharmaceutical to market. There's an estimate that in the crop protection space, to bring a new synthetic molecule to market, it takes just as long, about 9 years, and it takes $250 billion. So how do you expedite that? How do you do it cheaper? So they're working in the bio space, so it's cheaper in that respect, but this also allows it to be faster. So they both do their own R&D, come up with microbes. They select the ones that they want to pursue, and then they each do what they're good at. So Novozymes does small-scale fermentation, process optimization, manufacturing. Monsanto then does field testing, regulatory stuff, and then commercialization. So working together, doing what they're both better at. But this isn't the only partnership that Novozymes has. And I think they really stand out because they're doing things beyond just the typical cooperation with another company, cooperation with another startup, or with a startup. They're also doing crowdsourcing. They're doing makerspaces. And yesterday, Mark asked how many people have been to a makerspace. Not too many people raised their hands. And this company is supporting a makerspace in Copenhagen, where there's basically a bunch of people tinkering in a lab trying to figure out new options for products. They also advertise right on their website what they want to work on and invite people to contact them and say, hey, we're interested in this too, let's work together. So very creative in how they approach cooperation in this space. So again, we could go through all of the examples of how companies are able to tap into integration, accommodation, cooperation. For integration, we see On-Farms has solutions where they integrate data to help farmers monitor and react more efficiently to the issues that they're seeing on the farm. Going back to Rick's statement about you might know agriculture, but you don't know farming. I think really being able to work within what farmers need is important here. A company called Marrone Bio Innovations, I think, is a good example of accommodation in this space. So they have a platform approach. They're a biopesticide company. They have a platform approach where they identify all kinds of different plant extracts and microorganisms and fungi that might have anti-pest capabilities or functionality. And they're able to very quickly screen for these properties And then they're also able to formulate a compound that's even more effective than what they might be getting through the regular fermentation process. They work very closely with growers very early on in their R&D stage to help fine-tune the products that they're making. But they also recognize that, aside from organic farmers that might be interested in their product, they do want to accommodate growers that may be very comfortable and used to using synthetic chemicals for pest management. And so they have worked with those chemicals to figure out that in many cases, if they put the two together, both their product and the chemicals that are typically used by the farmer, they basically get a 1 + 1 = 3 reaction. They're able to enhance the effectiveness of this combination of bio plus synthetic pesticides. Okay. So I want to go back to Nicaragua. And this is a screenshot of a YouTube video for how to build a biosand water filter, which I was working with an organization in Bluefields, Nicaragua. We were doing this for a town that didn't have pure drinking water, so we were building these and showing other people how they can build them as well. They're really cheap, really effective. But at the end of the day, this is just basic needs we're talking about. This isn't sophisticated technology. But at the same time, we can see that there is a need for sophisticated technology, and technology that we could use here in the US, they could use in Managua. We're kind of in a similar situation. So this is an article from one of the main newspapers in Nicaragua called El Nuevo Diario, and it's basically talking about the fact that their water infrastructure in the city of Managua is inefficient, it's leaking too much water, it's not supplying the levels that they need for a growing population, which is happening in Managua. So this is a great example of a place where, and there's money flowing into it as well, a great example of a place where they're struggling with the same thing that we're struggling with here in the US. There's money going into trying to improve the infrastructure, the water infrastructure there. And this would be a great place for a company like Takadu or MIA to figure out how do we work with the local utility to implement this technology that we're implementing all over the world. Any guesses as to what this picture is all about? No? No? Okay. This is the president of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, shaking hands with a representative from the Chinese firm HK&D. They have just agreed that this Chinese firm will build and operate the next Panama Canal that will go through Nicaragua. It's supposed to start later this year with the construction. And you can see here along the red line is where they're planning to build this canal. It's a $40 billion project being partially financed by the Chinese firm. The canal, interestingly, goes through a nature preserve and then through Lake Nicaragua, which I wanted to just mention. I don't know how many of you have seen Mark Binger's talks over the years, but they always involve a shark. So I wanted to just mention there's a shark in my presentation as well. This lake is one of the few places in the world where there are freshwater sharks. I've never seen any when I was there. But this is actually, these two islands are, one's a dormant volcano and one is active. And when you stand on the beach there, it's the most quiet and peaceful place in the world. I've never been to a place outside that's as quiet as that location right there. And then it goes out the other side. So this particular project is going to need some real consideration of how do we build this and be able to resist the changes that are going to be happening in rising sea levels, in different severe weather events, when we've got this massive infrastructure project we're about to pursue. So new technology is going to play an important role there as well. And it is an example of also the private funding and the private opportunity that's there. And then also in agriculture, we also see that there's both private and public funding and interest in offering solutions in developing countries like this one. So this is an article I mentioned to you. I'm a huge coffee drinker, and this is very upsetting to me that there's quite a lot of risk to the coffee crop in Central America. And private companies are starting to get involved because this affects their supply chain. And they need to find solutions to these pest problems that either were non-existent or were nowhere near the severity that they are now. And so you see companies like Green Mountain Coffee investing money into protecting against coffee rust in Central America. You see Adichia also wrote an insight on Starbucks getting into this issue because of their supply chain. So it's certainly a problem that we are connected to these problems, and we do need to find solutions that tackle them. This, I just wanted to show this as a project description, and if you read through it, it talks about that we need innovation going to countries like Nicaragua. We need technology transfer because we need to improve the productivity in the country. And there was an article I was reading about how the advisor to President Ortega that advises him on agriculture talked about that he estimates the country loses about $200 million every year from lost productivity to climate change now. Like right now, it's losing that much because of climate change. And also, there's more money coming in. The World Bank every year has increased the funding because they see the progress happening in Nicaragua. So to sum up, I think when I work with clients, a lot of them are very focused on environmental megatrends. This is a huge risk, opportunity, and consideration for them. I think there are many innovations and many opportunities in industries that are particularly challenging to work in. And if we can look at what's working, integration, accommodating the existing industry, but certainly cooperating with the key players in each of these spaces is really important. And really, the way to be successful in these industries. And I will just leave you with a little bit of inspiration for why I really enjoy working with clients on finding innovations to support environmental megatrends. This is a picture that I took a little over a month ago along the Pacific coast, along Nicaragua, and it was the sunset there. So I'm happy to take any questions and give any travel advice if I've convinced any of you that that should be your next vacation location. So thank you very much.